they messed up in, what was it, 2018 at the first Wall of Forgotten Natives, where it was like, we are just going to be happy with scraps. You're going to house us. We're going to be happy. Woohoo. Problems over. They didn't have wraparound services like mental health, addiction services, cultural services. We dropped the ball there because we had no follow-up with our people. We threw addicted people into apartments without wraparound or follow-up.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
Calling out cat people. This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
This is the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. I'm joined by Jason Garcia. We're doing an episode about homelessness in Minneapolis. Jason, you came to me recently and said there was a topic you wanted to cover. You said we have to do an episode on this. Tell me why you thought it was important to do an episode on this topic.
We've been seeing the effects of the housing crisis in Minneapolis for years in mainstream media and getting attention for the last several years. For a lot of the marginalized communities in Minneapolis, it's been going on much longer. And it's something that unfortunately doesn't get a lot of attention unless it's sort of sensationalized. And a lot of the people who are involved in doing the work of working with unhoused neighbors, trying to provide shelter, trying to provide resources, really don't get a lot of attention brought to the work that they're doing. And it's also, the beginning of December. It's getting cold, and we're going to see snow soon. And once again, the city under Jacob Frey has just continued its relentless attacks and displacement campaign against unhoused neighbors. So I know that's something that we've brought up before, and we've talked about housing, how important that is, affordable housing. But as we get into the coming months, I think it's really important for all of the viewers and listeners to understand and to see the human side of how that is impacting our neighbors.
When I think back to 2018, 2019, and like the formation of the Wall of Forgotten Natives, that was a huge topic at City Hall, and the city, it felt like a crisis. They were treating it as a crisis, and they allocated, I think they spent like $3 million on like 3 tents, spent a lot of money. Those tents were there for like 6 months. I think it was meant to house like 170 people, and that eventually went away. That was a one-time thing the city was doing. I don't know if that worked, if that was good, if that was the right approach, but at least it felt like people were treating it as a crisis. And now
Right.
It feels like it's just a thing that happens, and we don't necessarily treat it with as much urgency as we did at the time. I don't know if we're just getting numb to it, but now is a time to bring in our guests, Nicole Mason and Christin Crabtree, who are, I don't know how to describe what they're doing, organizers, volunteers at Camp Nenookaasi over in the Phillips neighborhood. Welcome to the Wedge Live podcast. Thank you for being here, Nicole and Christin.
Thank you for having us.
Nicole, I thought I would just go through what Camp Nenookaasi is. Just some quick questions. We could tell the story of that to begin. Does that sound good? Or if there's anything in the preamble to the episode that you want to respond to, and just start out with that, or introduce yourself, anything you want to do to start.
My name is Nicole. My spirit name is Nenookaasi Kwe. I'm a grateful indigenous woman in recovery, a single mother of 5 children and 2 grandchildren. And I am a enrolled member of the Red Lake Nation, and I am also a lifetime resident of the East Phillips neighborhood.
Let's talk about the Camp Nenookaasi. When was the camp established? How many people live there? Like, who are they? Where did they come from? Where were they living before they were living there? Some of the basics of what's going on.
I became involved because I am a woman in recovery, and Nenookaasi started with I was watching a lot of social media and watching a lot of the evictions. I would show up. I would help my friend Melissa brings them with outreach at night to make sure people had blankets, to see, if they had propane tanks, did they have gloves. She would fill up her car and just go around South Minneapolis and East Phillips neighborhood to where people were living in their tents and seeing if they were warm, if they needed anything to stay warm. And so I did that for a while. Once in a while, actually. It was hard to go out in the community and see our people in that way. Kind of made me uncomfortable. And it made me uncomfortable in my recovery, like as if I wasn't strong enough to be out there. I got anxiety over watching people using drugs. And so I told her I couldn't do it, that it was too hard, and that I was having feelings around that, and that I wasn't strong enough yet. So I had decided to do a lot more focus on my own recovery, on my spiritual teachings, my traditions, and go to a lot more ceremonies whenever possible. After the summer ceremonies, I came back and I realized that there was an eviction happening the next morning. So I went to go where the eviction was happening, and it was really hurtful. During ceremony, in and out, when I get back online, I see in all the posts, and then I realized there was a pattern of relatives coming up missing, and people were looking for their relatives. There was a lot of postings, and I haven't seen, and so I said, this is a pattern. Every eviction, people come up missing. A lot of indigenous people come up missing. There's a lot of overdoses out there. And I said, we have to do something. And I was telling my friends, we have to do something about this. Like, when will this stop? We're losing our people. And so when I came back, I watched that eviction, and I saw elders with their little scooters or wheelchairs trying to gather their belongings or ask other people, can you help me? While those people are also trying to save their belongings. And people, a lot of tears, a lot of despair and sadness. It was very hurtful to watch. And so I grabbed the elders and I put them in the van, and I drove around with them. I drove them around to shelters. I made calls. And I drove around with them until the night. Took them out to eat, trying to figure out. And I watched all these people with their carts, with their wagons, and it was very hurtful to watch our people like that. And they said, where do we go? Where do we go? And I said, we need to help the people now. And so I start texting, and I said, this is ridiculous. We have to help the people now. We have to stand up for our people, or we're going to lose them. So we called in and said, go to the Wall of Forgotten Natives. Everybody was right around that area. I didn't want to make them travel too far. And so we started that day to follow the relatives all the time, day and night. We started calling people to bring in food, to feed them, postings, different posts, bring water. It was very hot. And so we were at the wall for a week. I think we had about 125 relatives at that point, somewhere around there. And then we got evicted. I guess I could back up a little bit. what's different about our camp is that we brought the culture in. And I remember at the Wall of Forgotten Natives, I walked around with my smudge can and I asked the relatives, here, I brought my smudge around and I said, smudge, these medicines heal. And they said, I can't smudge. No, I'm under the influence or whatnot. And they'd put, and they'd walk away and they were scared to smudge. They were scared of those medicines. And I'm like, but wait, these medicines are for you. These medicines will heal you. These medicines are meant for the people that are struggling. The people right now, you need them the most. You need these prayers. You need these medicines. And I think out of those 125, 130 people, I was able to get 2 people to smudge. But I took my feather and I still tried to smudge them off a bit, get their back as they walked away. As we got evicted and we moved on to the property that we're on now, we helped them move. It was a nice, peaceful eviction. I think the most peaceful that they have experienced in a long time. But there was still desperation in their eyes and sadness, a lot of tears, a lot of anxiety. Where are we to go? What are we to do? I saw elders crying, women crying, and I just told them all stay close. And I said exactly where we meet at the park. We all sat in the park and we all moved together so that we didn't lose anybody. When we moved into where we were at, right away, we made sure there was lots of water, food, told people to settle in. And I think we had talking circles in the grass. And I just remember everybody when we went around and just said, like, my name's Nicole, and I'm from Red Lake. And maybe if they had their spirit name, they got to share that. Just very simple, They talked so quiet that we couldn't hear each other. And we did that day after day. And we smudged. And we had cedar tea. And we put tobacco in the fire. And we put cedar in the fire. And I would throw whole bundles of sage right in the fire so that the whole camp would get smudged with cedar and with sage. And I would go around and smudge so many times a day. I can't even tell you how much sage I've been through.
Maybe we should tell listeners what smudging is.
That's like you use sage to pray with. So you burn it in your shell, and then you pull the smoke towards your body into your heart, and you pray with it.
So the encampment was evicted off of MnDOT land owned by the state, and you say that was a relatively peaceful eviction. Like, one of the dynamic, anyone who lives in Minneapolis is probably familiar with this, is that the encampments are being evicted, pushed around from place to place. It's not solving the problem, it's just pushing it from place to place, and there are different entities. Now you're on city-owned land, I think, right?
Yep.
Yes. Well, the eviction was... Do you remember, Kristen, how many sheriffs were there around?
Oh, gosh. So when Nicole says that it was fairly peaceful, I think in the sense that we had community there with the people, that people were not as alone. And that is what helped. But it felt violent. We had at least 20 sheriffs there, a large police presence. They had brought in, like, I don't remember what they're called, the thing that makes the loud noise, It felt, we were surrounded because we were along a wall, and then we had state troopers is who was there surrounding the area, as well as police. And so it felt very anxiety inducing for sure. And compared to other evictions I've been at, it felt slightly different because there was that presence of so many of us, and the fact that, Nicole said, we're going to stay in the park and we're all going to move together. We're not going to leave anybody behind.
Right. So, Nicole, I saw your testimony at City Hall like last week or the week before. I can't remember about. I think the topic was like the appointment of the city's CPED director. And you were very adamant, we need porta potties delivered to where the current camp is on city-owned land. I think it has been the city's policy, like, no, we're not going to deliver porta potties. We're not going to provide services because that encourages the camp to stick around. So we're not going to help you out. But they did deliver porta potties, right? They delivered the porta potties.
Yes, they did.
And so is this a change in city policy? Like, I've also heard from Christin that the city is letting people know they're going to evict the camp on the 14th, maybe. So can you talk about like getting the porta potties delivered? Were you surprised that happened? And are you surprised that after delivering the porta potties, they're now going to evict the camp?
The porta potties were approved a long time ago. So when did we get them delivered? Was it last
Wednesday?
So last Wednesday they were approved. I mean, they were brought in. The porta potties were approved 3 weeks prior, but the mayor, Fry, would not sign off on it. Enrique and Eric and council members were all okay with it. They were actually supporting it because people are being housed, people are being serviced. The neighborhood has been peaceful. They said it's the cleanest camp and the best encampment that they have ever seen. And so they were supposed to have the porta potties 3 weeks prior. But the mayor wouldn't sign off to have them delivered.
Christin, maybe you can answer this. Who has said that there's going to be an eviction on the 14th? Who is communicating that to the camp?
I received a phone call. So we got the bathrooms on Wednesday, and on Thursday, I received a phone call at 7:30 p.m. from Enrique Velasquez, who is the Director of Regulatory Services, and he called to let me know that the city planned to evict on the 14th. And at that time, he said he'd love to, he's learned a lot from what we've done, and he would like to make a plan, at which point I asked him why the city would evict when they don't have a plan. And he didn't have an answer for me.
So he said he's learned from what's happened there. Does that learned what? Like how to do a camp like in a way that it has fewer side effects for the neighborhood, how to do that well, how to what do you think he's learned? What do you think the city is learning from this when you hear that?
I mean, I'm not sure how. I don't know. I think what they've seen is that I feel like they may not have learned what I would hope they would learn. But what has happened since we've been together and stayed with the people is that 74 people have been housed. That's huge. That's more impactful than what's happened previously. We've had 0 deaths from overdose at Nenookaasi, and we've been together now, I think it's been nearly 110 days maybe. So that's pretty miraculous and not aligned with what we often see happen in these situations. And the lesson I hope they would learn is that when we create safer space for people and when we create stability and respect the humanity and dignity of human beings, and we meet basic needs, that it creates opportunity for hope and it creates opportunity for healing. It has made a huge difference. Several outreach groups come to our camp, whether it's, through Hennepin County or different nonprofit groups and so forth. And the thing that's been cool is that the residents are able to stay connected with those services and start making progress towards whatever their goal may be or the next step that they want to take. And that is a beautiful thing. And when evictions happen, all of that work gets disrupted. It's really important for someone who is unhoused to be able to have that process, be able to navigate that process. There's lots of barriers to getting housing. There's lots of barriers that people need help to overcome because they need an ID. They need, if they have any outstanding issues legally, they need to deal with those oftentimes before they can access housing. So if an eviction happens and your ID is thrown away and your sense of stability is disrupted, it's really, really hard to follow go through that red tape, right? So I would hope what they've learned is that what they're doing actually undercuts other levels of government and the work they're doing. It actually is incredibly wasteful and also very inhumane, and it doesn't work. It actually perpetuates the issue. And I would hope they've learned that human beings are not the problem. The problem is the problem. And rather, we don't throw people away. We deal with the issues to help people overcome them. And I think I would hope that's what they've learned. But when Mr. Velasquez said that he's learned from us, he did not specify what that specifically was.
And just to highlight, before I toss it to Jason to see what Jason's thinking right now, you say 74 people have gotten housing, and that's one of the reasons the camp helps that happen is that people stay in one place. They can be connected to service providers. That's what you're saying is why this is helpful, and pushing people around from place to place. People get lost. They can't be found. They can't get the help they otherwise would have gotten. Jason?
Well, one of the things that I think that really stands out about Camp Nenookaasi is the intentionality and the cultural components that go into it. I don't think anybody would be surprised to hear that things are more successful when they take into account people's culture, people's heritage, their the things that they've learned, their experiences, and having a space that is approachable for people of indigenous backgrounds and things like that. I know in my day-to-day, I am fortunate to interact with a lot of indigenous people and with the Native community in Minneapolis. And I think that I hear so many positive things about that aspect. One of the things that I wanted to ask Nicole and Christin is, how do you feel supported by the broader indigenous community in Minneapolis? And also, like, do you feel like by coming from a place of more cultural competency that the city could take those lessons from you and find better ways to address the crisis of unhoused neighbors in Minneapolis?
Let's split that one up.
Okay.
So the first, if I feel supported by the broader indigenous community, absolutely not. We all know about the letter that came out from the Metropolitan Urban Indian Developers, which is MUD, where they doxed me. They, it's horrible. Came at me and the relatives in a horrible way without ever stepping foot into the camp. They gave my place of residence where I've had, if I'm out there, what us volunteers out there are doing. It's a indigenous-led camp. It's mostly led by women and by Two-Spirit people. And I'm out there running off. What they wrote in that letter is the pimps the drug dealers. I'm out there, keeping them safe, putting my life at risk to keep the relatives safe. And I've been threatened that I was get kidnapped, that I would disappear, that people were coming back for me. They gave my place of residence, so I've seen some of them drug dealers drive by my house on a bike. So I it's out there. I live in Little Earth. Everybody knows that. To drive by my house with a bike, and I'm in there early in the mornings, sitting outside drinking a coffee before I leave. And it has been scary. Without once coming into the camp, they judged, and they put a lot of things referencing to what an elder and what the residents has said. And that elder actually went to a group of us that are trying to fight the opioid crisis come together of community members on every other Wednesday. And that elder read that letter, and she said, I barely leave my house. And she said, they said cops have been called, that there's a girl being dragged out of their car. All of the things they referenced, it was things that she shared with them, but they did not share. And she came and she said, they said I'm in all these meetings, but I never leave my house. She said, they said this girl was being drugged into a car, but what they did not say was that, yes, I called the police, but it took the police 1 hour and 20 minutes to come. And she said it was Nicole that saved that girl. They didn't mention that in the letter. If it wasn't for Nicole, this lady, she said, she is out here fighting everybody up and down the block to keep the relatives safe. She's yelling at them, our elders live here and you respect our elders. And so these are the words from this elder. And she said, I need to set the record straight that I never said any of these things, or they twisted my words. And they didn't add the part that it's her out there day and night. And they said she came and she shook my hand and she said, thank you for coming into our community and helping our people. She said, I pray for you guys every day. And that was it. And it kind of set the record straight there at that meeting. They never apologized for putting my family or myself at risk. My car was targeted, stolen and vandalized.
I'm sorry you had to go through that. I know that there have been so many discussions back and forth, and, certainly dealing with the city and the county and the state level governments, as well as, these other non-governmental organizations, is a lot of work. And I know I appreciate all of the work that you've been doing with that, and I know a lot of people in the community appreciate that, so I want to make sure that you know that right off the bat. But when you get these sorts of responses from people in the neighborhood or in a broader community, and I definitely want to come back to the other question I had asked too, but do you feel like that's extra hurtful and extra difficult?
We do get a lot of support. I've received a lot of messages from friends, or they've stopped by with extra clothing for the relatives or food and whatnot, and they said, I'm sorry that I can't be present, but where I work, and it would make it hard for me to be supporting the camp or even make it public that I'm supporting the camp. That letter was sent to a lot of senators and a lot of politicians and a lot of, decision makers, which made a divide for our people, which is, made it a bit complicated, but they don't speak for everybody. It's unfair. It's very unfair for them to be able to speak for everybody when we all, in the end, want the same thing. I feel like it's time, and a lot of my videos that I put out there, I say it's time for us Indigenous people to stand together on this. It's time to make the government, the policymakers, the mayor, it's time to make them feel uncomfortable. I know sometimes it's uncomfortable for our people to be around addiction because we have so much trauma within our people. This is what we're left with. Our people weren't homeless until the boats came over. Our people have been traumatized for centuries, for so long. But we really, really started being hurt when our families were taken off to boarding schools. And this is a vicious cycle that we've been through. We've been here before. We were here in the 70s when our people were being mistreated by police, pushed around in alcoholism. They were in a mind-altering addiction at that point, and we stood strong together. They were homeless. People were homeless, and they were being brutalized by the police, and we stood strong together, and that's how we became, we got Little Earth housing. Then, we had this is a vicious cycle, is all I can say. And now what's the difference of our people not coming together with this fentanyl addiction that we have within our people? We need to build our people up. I've heard a lot of people saying rock bottom. Wait till they're rock bottom. They are rock bottom, and they cannot dig themselves out. So we need to lift them up out of that hole that they're in and uplift them. At this point, this is, I feel, and how I see it, is that this is the damage that we're left with from boarding schools and how our people were mistreated. And we need to come together as one and heal our people and show them love.
A lesson that I learned a long time ago from a very, very wise friend of mine was that you can't blame the people who have the least in terms of resources or power within a system for the way things are. And, it's easy to blame the people who have the least because they're a simple target and they generally can't say anything back or fight back. But that makes it all the more important to direct your energy toward the people who do have power, who do have resources. It's very easy for people, I feel like, to go back to your point, John, even going back to 2018, it became very easy to say, like, it is the fault of the people who are unhoused, and I don't want to see them. What that is what has directed the policy under Mayor Fry and his administration, is just this constant moving of people and recreating the traumas of Indigenous people constantly being moved from what is their land that they have ancestrally held for thousands of years. And, just constantly brutalizing and victimizing the people who have the least resources and the least systematic power. And, it's very hurtful then to me personally when I see letters like from MUD that are, again, putting the blame on the people who are dealing with being unhoused, who are dealing with addiction, or just even the historical oppressions that Indigenous people have dealt with in this country. I guess that's my editorialization on that. But I did want to go back, Nicole, and then ask, like, what sorts of lessons do you hope that people are taking from the work that you're doing, and, you know, the way that you engage with people in a culturally significant way, the way that you incorporate the 4 medicines into the daily lives at camp and things like that?
I feel like it really needed to take a certain person to come and do this, because it's been done many times where people have come in and tried to help, but not much was done. Not long ago, I was there using with a lot of the people, so I was in their place 3 years ago, and when I was using with a lot of people, I said, I'm going to treatment. And when I get sober and I get strong enough, I'm coming back for all of you guys. And I kept telling them that, and I kept telling them that, and that's exactly what I'm doing now. I have 2 sober dates, which is coming up. December 10th is 1 year off of alcohol, and February 25th is 3 years off of drugs. And
congratulations.
It took me a long time to realize that I needed culture, and I needed my traditions, and I needed to use my medicines every day to stay strong for the people. And so that's what I'm doing, because I know that using these medicines every day, anytime that you have a struggle, I know that they heal. And I tell them, I know in my heart that these medicines heal. And so I know in my heart that our people can overcome this. I feel like I had a dream about this a long time ago. And I know that our people will overcome this if we come together with our traditions and we care for them and we bring them up and we help them understand why they have a hurt in their heart that they can't understand where that comes from. And I had a dream about this, and it was way before my addiction. I had a dream about encampments. I had a dream about our people, and it was weird. And it didn't come back to me until I was in the camp. And so I know that this will help, give us the resources, and we will help our own people heal. And I truly believe that in my heart.
So Nicole, you speak about resources. Do you think the city, the county, some government entity has a role to play? So I think about like what the city tried 5 years ago with the tents to respond to the Wall of Forgotten Natives, and that went away. Is there a way to create a sanctioned camp? Like these are the rules. We're providing porta potties and a bunch of other services. Like, find a spot and say, okay, we're doing it here, and the government is a partner in running it. Talk about what you think the solution is. Is something like what I've described, is that the solution? Or if not, what is?
Boy, I was waiting for this. So what I am is like, they messed up in, 2018 at the first Wall of Forgotten Natives, where it was like, we are just going to be happy with scraps. You're going to house us. We're going to be happy. Woohoo. Problems over. They didn't have wraparound services like mental health, addiction services, cultural services. We dropped the ball there because we had no follow-up with our people. We threw addicted people into apartments without wraparound or follow-up to make sure, hey, I housed Nicole. Let me go back and check and make sure that she's doing okay. Does she need anything? Does she have even food? Let me check up on her that she's not lonely. As long as we keep housing people without mental health services, without culture, without helping them find recovery, we're always going to have encampments. So yes, I absolutely believe that we need a sanctioned encampment area where people can come for refuge, to be safe, to be there. To be like almost like an exit camp. You come in, so Nicole can come in and say, yes, I would like to stay, with knowing that the end result would be eventually getting housed and getting help with your mental health. But people really need to build up to that, because they need to get just a chance to breathe. It took a while for our people to get rested up, a chance to eat. Some of them said they didn't even know when they had their last hot meal or they had eaten. They were so sick. Get their health care. Get, in contact with their outreach worker and making sure that they got their needs, that they get their needs met. It took, I think, the first 2 months for people to mentally and physically be ready to do this, because as I saw the camp, I saw people using less. I saw a lot of people like not nodding out, not being zoned out. They were holding their heads up high and got routines to go to the clinic, to go and check in with their outreach workers, to go see, someone at the library or harm reduction at the NAC. Like, they had routines through the week that they knew, what's today again? What time is it? Oh, shoot, I got to go here. It's shower time. It's get up and clean your tent. I mean, these routines have been wild, what you see right now in the camp. And it's nothing like when I went in and said, this is a healing camp. I thought it's a recovery camp because, you have to do. And so when I say that you have to prepare yourself, it took me 1.5 years to get a Roll 25 because I was on drugs. I couldn't think right. It was frustrating. They need to prepare themselves in order to get there, because they've been on the streets a long time. And they need lots of loves, and they need lots of support. I absolutely think a camp like that would work, where people check in and then they have to work towards getting housing. Right now, we've had an elder there, so the 110 days we've been there, she's been with us. And she's barely getting her apartment tomorrow. And she has been years out on the street, and they said they have been chasing her 1 year with all these evictions. An elder. It should be that we should have policies where if there's an elder out there, there is housing for them right away. Why all the barriers, all the paper signing? I've watched it. It's ridiculous how there's a flaw in our system why it takes so long.
Do you see in your dealings with the city, your activism, your interactions with government, do you feel like there's a political path towards some kind of solution? Like, are we making progress politically towards a solution? Or do you feel like we're just continuing to spin our wheels? Do you feel hopeful at all?
I do.
I do too.
I do. I feel like right now we are demanding this for our people. I don't feel like it should be an option anymore, because I believe that our people deserve this. They've been out there suffering way too long. And like I said, it's time for all of us, no matter what race you are, to come together. If you have a passion, if you have heart for the people, it's time to make people that I feel like it's time to make like the decision makers uncomfortable. It's time for them to face this and do something about it. It's time for us to stand together and make this happen. And so I've told and I've made it be known, or how do I want to say? That sounds really tough. I want to take that back. I say that I'm not going to stop. So why not listen to the people? The mayor had said when city council went in, right, that he was going to start listening to the people. But where have you started listening to the people? Where have you even showed up to the camp and say, hey, I want to see these guys? But they're not even looked at as human beings. We are not human beings. We are nothing to somebody like him. Show us where you're listening to us or that we matter. I still haven't gotten my answer from this. So it's like, we need him and the policymakers to listen to us. Because you know what? I am going nowhere. Our whole team of volunteers are going nowhere. They evict us, we will pop up every place. And we will not stop until policies are changed for encampments, until something comes different. So it just makes more sense. I mean, why don't I understand why they're not asking us to come sit at the table and listen?
I agree. I want to say too, just quick, I do think there's opportunity. I think as we have seen, this last election, we did flip our council a little more progressive. I am hopeful that will help, but honestly, this is a multi-jurisdictional thing, and part of the ways that things have moved so far is the city will point the finger at the county, who will then point the finger at the state, who will then point the finger at the federal government, and then I'm sure we all saw Ilhan come and address city council, I don't know, a couple months ago and say, well, we brought all this federal funding. Why is it not being applied for appropriately? Like, she literally said that at council. So, I'm frustrated with the finger pointing. And while I understand that different jurisdictions have different responsibilities, for them to undercut one another makes zero sense. And I am hopeful that with this new council, that will help a bit. We've got some brilliant people. However, we know that these decisions right now, where we are on city land, fall under the mayor. And so my hope is that we can start being more constructive in our decisions. And I would love to see the political courage and honestly the integrity in our public servants and leaders, and remember that they work for us. And it's really important to me. What brought me partly to this work is, recognizing that these are human beings. And I was taught by people who came before me that when I put the most vulnerable people in the center of whatever I'm doing, that we will all do better. That is what I've learned. And I, while this camp is primarily indigenous, it's not completely indigenous. And I want to name that the cultural practices Nicole has brought have been healing for me too. And I'm grateful to be a guest in that space. And I just want to, say that it's really important to me as a mother, as well. One of my child's very best friends was one of the first people to die at the Wall of Forgotten Natives. From overdose. And that was really traumatic for our family. And the thing that brought me and Nicole together, I think, is we both saw people going missing and being assaulted. And Nicole and I both were spending hours and all this time trying to find people that were missing and raising funds to go get them when our systems and nonprofit partners fell short. And it was really, really hard. But I came to that as a survivor of violence myself. And in my healing practice, I've learned that healing justice for me, what justice looks like, is transforming the conditions in our world, the way that we receive survivors and care for survivors, the way that we each hold a collective responsibility to change violent conditions into something that centers well-being and care. And so that's really what has gotten me out in these streets in these past couple of years and doing this work. And I just want to also piggyback something Nicole said. We are doing so much to keep one another safe. Being with people at Nenookaasi I feel safe at Nenookaasi because I have 200 people that have my back. And also, we find ourselves doing some of our own community safety work. We both are chasing people down the street, that risking our own lives sometimes, and our community as a whole. And I think of Nenookaasi as a community. I don't even like to think of it as an encampment. We have built a community there. And like Nicole was saying, we see people who are, their holding their heads high, taking care of each other, making sure the elders get a plate before others eat. When elders are hungry or cold, they're getting brought a blanket, they're being cared for. It is a beautiful place to be. It's really affirming of humanity and what's possible when we take care of each other.
When I think about the politics, like, I feel like even if you're the kind of person who's like, no, I don't want this happening in my neighborhood, like the idea of pushing encampments from one place to another, like everyone kind of gets that that's not working. Like no one is winning in that situation. And so I don't, like even Mayor Fry, as low an opinion as I have of Mayor Fry, you would think he would want to find a solution that makes even his voters happy, because I think even his supporters realize that the way the city is doing this is not working. Pushing it from place to place, like these people still exist. They don't disappear.
Well, you don't mean
It works for them.
yeah.
You know why? Because we're doing the work of what the city should have been doing all along, is keeping the people safe. You know, each eviction, the city charges or has a budget of $70,000 to $250,000 per eviction. In these 110 days, can we imagine? I don't know how many weeks that is, but as they were evicting every week to every other week, we have saved the city millions.
Yep.
With keeping the relatives in one spot. Like, where is this a no-brainer? So is it like they, you know, is that where it comes down to?
Just money.
That something is with that money of the evictions, the fences going up throughout the city? Like, our city looks horrible. But we have saved the city millions.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that there's something to be said when you were talking about pushing people around. And while, I don't think any person wants there to be encampments, whether it's in your yard or somebody else's. What we do know is that when we've been in one place and meeting basic needs, that it actually interrupts some of the harms that people talk about from encampments. We've seen, like I said, people taking care of each other. On top of it, when we're all in one place, then people aren't in that place of desperation and cold, hungry, the things that push you to, we criminalize the survival that is available for a lot of these folks. And when we take care of each other, then we're going to see less of some of those harms that come from really our, survival things that people are doing to get by. When we shift the conditions so that those things are no longer necessary, which is what's happening at Nenookaasi and what I would love to see be possible for all people. I don't want it to only be East Phillips, only be this community. I want to see the people behind the car wash. I want to see Camps in North. I want to see everybody get what they need, because that's going to reduce those harms and really create possibility for something else. And politically, I do believe there are people who know that. I'm aware of the state having funding for safer spaces, safer outdoor spaces. I am aware of the county has quite a bit of resources, and their workers come to Nenookaasi and do great work. Their workers would probably be really happy if these evictions weren't also happening to our community members that live over off Lake Street and so forth. And I want to see us being more constructive. If they're not going to do it because of it being the thing that is morally and ethically correct, then at least do it because it makes more financial sense. Which I hate even saying that, but it's just ridiculous what's happening now. We're undercutting everything. When we say we're making historic investments in housing and the same people are unhoused now, that many of them are at the wall, then clearly something else needs to shift, and these cultural solutions help. Jamal Osman just talked about it last week at one of the council budget meetings, that he believes that these cultural solutions make sense because he's seeing too in the East African community how this is impacting people, and that culturally in those communities, the way that this has an impact is maybe different than the way that we would see in our indigenous population or in our Black African American population and so forth. The thing they have in common, human beings, and almost every single one, there is a severe level of trauma that is going on. And so that healing piece, it really matters. We can't just throw people into a building and call it a day. We have to take care of each other too.
Yeah. Nicole, did somebody tell you the key to my heart was to bring your cat onto the Wedge Live podcast? Who told you to bring your cat?
That was probably Christin.
I'm so sorry. I'm never home anymore, and she's just so happy I'm here. And she's like on the other side of the screen staring at me, and then she's like, "I just need you now." So
I love it. I'm glad that your cat has been able to be our 5th guest here today.
Yeah.
Jason, do you have you have any final thoughts here? Any final places you want to take the conversation before we wrap it up?
Yeah, one thing that we all had a good deal of fun a few years ago when the mayor rolled out his new organizational chart for the city that placed the citizens at the top and then himself below that. And I feel like this is a really good example of how there has been a lot of rhetoric and talk from the mayor's office that their actions don't line up. And you, as an election judge, surely know that there is no address requirement for you to be a voter. You can come in and say, I stay at the bridge under 11th Avenue and the Greenway. You can say anything like that and have a place to live within the city, and you are a citizen who is entitled to vote.
Jason, can I interrupt your anecdote? Because we were faced with a situation like this year with election judging, and the man didn't have anyone. Like, you need like staff at the place where you stay, or a person in the neighborhood, like a neighbor, to say, I know this person, I know where they live. You can't just come in. Sorry to spoil your anecdote, but it's very complicated, and he wasn't able to vote. And so, sad story. Yeah. I'm sorry to make your anecdote sad.
No, but that is the thing, is as long as you have that community, you're entitled to vote. Right. As long as you live within the city, you are a citizen. And by Jacob Fry's own words, you are entitled to speak to him and tell him your opinions and what he should be doing as a leader in the city. And I feel like that is an area where he has continually failed to back up his rhetoric, and instead has prioritized the opinions and the thoughts of people who have more money but don't even live in the city. And that's something that I don't think we should be afraid to invoke when we speak with him. He should be reminded that there are people that he was elected to serve, and he is completely failing in that regard.
I have a less like corruption solution for this, less of like money and power are making this bad. I feel like Jacob Fry in this instance is just not up to the job of solving the problem. I just feel like he's failing. Mm-hmm. Like, everyone wants this solved. Even the bad people want this solved. Mm-hmm. And he's just not up to the job. But maybe that's me being too kind to Jacob Fry. I say incompetence and not corruption, Jason.
I think that it's a combination of the two. I think that you're right that he doesn't, both and. Yeah. He doesn't have the vision or the necessarily even the desire to make the sort of changes that are needed. He wants to just continue rolling along as things are with as little disruption to himself personally as possible.
So Nicole, Mason, Christin, Crabtree, is there anything you want to plug? The things people can do to help you, a website you want people to go to before we end?
Yeah. Well, we're available on social media at Camp Nenookaasi. There's a link tree there that can get you more keyed in with the work we're doing. Like as we said, we've heard that we'll be evicted on December 14th, but we are working very hard to hopefully prevent that from happening. So we will be out and about. I don't know when this is coming out, but we will be out door knocking the community on the 9th, Saturday the 9th. On Sunday the 10th, Nicole will be speaking at Powderhorn Park at an anti-war rally. And then throughout this coming week, on the 13th, Wednesday the 13th, we will be gathering and marching from the Wall of Forgotten Natives to Camp Nenookaasi, at which point we will have a prayer vigil and enter into ceremony. And we invite the community to get to know the relatives, get to know our community, and not just Nenookaasi, get to know your unhoused neighbors in general. I spend a lot of time sitting around at Nenookaasi and talking with people and getting to know people, and have built relationships with so many of our neighbors who happen to be unhoused but are some of the most wonderful people that I know. And I really mean that. They're like authentically my community, and that matters a lot. So I want people to build those relationships, and I really am hopeful that people will show up for Camp Nenookaasi, will follow us and join us in this, not only for the betterment of East Phillips neighbors, but for our community in general, for everyone, because this work matters.
Nicole, you have anything to add, or?
No.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate you guys for inviting me. I just was listening to her, and it was so great. So
Yeah.
everything Christin said, I appreciate you guys for inviting me to your show.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Nicole Mason, Christin Crabtree have been our guests. Jason Garcia has been the co-host and executive producer of this episode. And I'm your host, John Edwards. This has been the Wedge Life Podcast. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.